Hi, everybody. This is Jack Rochester, and I'm joined today by my fellow barista, Jason Brick. We are communicating over Zoom between Portland, Oregon, and Boston, Massachusetts. Hi, Jason.
Hey Jack, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. The reason for our interview today is to talk about some of the big changes that are happening in the writing part of the publishing industry. There are a number of interesting branches to this process where if you go back 50, 75 years ago, the way a writer became a writer was by sitting down and reading a whole bunch of other novels and short stories and criticism about literature and developing a style of their own and then implementing it to write their own books. So you come up with somebody like an Ernest Hemingway, you come up with somebody like an F. Scott Fitzgerald. And today, that image of the sort of solitary writer has changed quite a lot. And we are in the midst of the internet influence of having a community. Everybody would like to be in a community of some kind or another, which might be going to writing conferences or forming a writer's reading group or taking classes or getting an MBA. These are some of the more traditional ways that writers approach becoming a writer today. Are they effective? Are they helpful? That's one of the things we're going to talk about today because Jason Brick, my fellow barista here at Fictional Cafe, has been a writer for many years. In fact, I had the pleasure of mentoring him many years ago, and he is now author or editor of 44 different books, has written a whole load of articles for different magazines, journals, and online publications, and is a very accomplished writer and has recently added to his value by marrying one of the best literary agents that ever to come out of Canada. So he's really into this stuff, folks, and we're going to talk about it today. One of the things that stimulated our conversation was an article that was in the New York Times a few days ago, talking about writers and writers, published writers who have started teaching other people to write. And Jason is right on top of this whole movement. The article is entitled "On a Mountain of Words, They Are Your Sherpas," which kind of sounds silly to me, doesn't it? Jason, to you? Hi, are we looking for a Sherpa? I don't know, maybe. But anyway, we'd like to jump in and talk about some of these trends and find out how you, our Fictional Cafe community, feel about your writing and your progress in your writing, because Jason has some very distinctive ideas for how to move yourself toward a higher point in your career. And I know, just talking about some of the people I've known over the years, there are a lot of writers out there who are good writers who start a novel. They might get to a point in the novel, or they might get to the end of the novel, and then they kind of go back and maybe read it and revise it a little bit, and then they come back and read it and revise it a little bit more, and 15 years later, they still haven't done anything with it. And so let's talk about those people and what the people are more looking for today, Jason, from your perspective, because you're really on top of this whole scene.
Well, it's kind of easy to say so. And one thing I've noticed is my background was not in writing literature. I was actually encouraged to write, apparently had a talent for it even in high school. My best friend in high school was your son Josh, and my other best friend's mother was a technical writer. I had all of these resources available to me, so of course I spent the first 10 years of my adult life in an entirely different industry, because you don't listen to adults when you're 19. Who does? Uh, that industry was martial arts, where I was taught, because I had some very good teachers, another paradigm in terms of project management, amount of effort that is required to get what you want done, and just discipline in yourself to do it. Those authors who write away a couple of pages a week for years and never quite get it edited, who never quite get it submitted, the trouble is that they're not prioritizing their writing. And if you want to be that kind of writer, the kind of writer who's got a book they're kind of working on mostly for themselves, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But if you're watching this podcast, there's a very good chance that you want to become a published author or write for a living as your sole source of income. And if that's the case, there are concepts in business management, project management, and marketing that all writers are smart enough to understand. They just majored in something that never exposed them to the concepts. And that's pretty much what I do when I go speak at writers' conferences internationally, is I bring these ideas to writers who then run with it.
And what sort of response do you get?
About 50-50 wild enthusiasm and naked terror. There's a lot of writers who hear the word sales and they go, ew, sales.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about sales. If you're married, you sold something once and you enjoyed the experience. Sales is really just being so passionate about something you love that you infect the people around you with that passion and that love. And then they go out and they love that thing that you're passionate about too. The last time you recommended a book to somebody who read it, you sold a book. And the question I have for you there is, if you can't be that passionate about the book you wrote, why aren't you writing a better book?
Indeed.
You should love your books and have other people love them as well.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and in fact, we're all selling something all the time. And most of our selling is very soft these days. The old image of a salesman trying to cram a product or a service down somebody's throat is just, it's passe.
It is. And I think that's what most people respond to when they hear me talking about writing in business terms. They think of that, that's great, we love you, babe, kind of salesperson, the jerk who's slapping the hood of the Camaro just lightly enough that the wheels don't fall off.
Yeah.
And that's the reputation that the Mad Men 20th century style marketing created. But real sales is legitimate. It's truthfully sharing why you think something will help somebody else and make their lives better. And in the case of us authors, it's just, man, you've got to read this book.
And a lot of people don't realize that once they write that query letter to an agent or perhaps to an indie publisher, they're selling.
Absolutely.
And if they're not selling, that letter is not going to get read. It's just that simple.
And you mentioned earlier that I'm married to an agent. Whenever I start feeling too big for my britches, I remind myself that I am married to an agent, but currently unrepresented. But she will, I know, right? She will come to me on a weekly basis with some letter out of the slush pile, just really frustrated by the lack of basic technique in those query letters. Because one of the great unfairnesses in our industry is the skill set required to write an excellent novel is not the same skill set required to sell that novel. Whether you sell it through a query letter or online or via reviews or by taking hostages and demanding people buy copies before they're released, whatever it is, those are different skills than writing a really great novel.
Very, very true. It's interesting. I can't help but think of a submission that came into Fictional Cafe last week from a fellow who is the first chapter of his novel. And he was very humble about it, but also very sincere in expressing what it was about in not too many words, and even apologizing for not writing, or apologizing for writing such a long email. And it wasn't really that long. But I began reading it and I was drawn into it. And by the time I got through reading that chapter, I wanted to sell this guy's novel to an agent. It was so good. It was so good. And it was just a natural, impulsive thing that came up in me because I liked that work so much.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think everybody watching this has had that experience with a book that they read that they just could not wait to tell their friends about it. There's a book I read about a year ago that I got so passionate about, so excited about. My wife forbade me from talking about it in front of her because she got bored of hearing it.
Let's talk a little bit, if you can, about your evolution from a writer who is just getting started and what that was like for you, how you began to learn these techniques that you have so effectively implemented in today's life, in your literary life today.
Well, it's all about my mentors, honestly. And you're among them, Jack. I could not be where I am without having made some contacts through you into the industry. Although that is true, but everybody's got contacts. Some of the other contacts that got me started was my first career was in martial arts, and when I first went out to hang out my own shingle as a writer, some of the first people I approached for writing assignments were the martial arts teachers I knew who had websites with terrible copy, and I got them to let me write their blogs for a while for pay. So finding those contacts wherever you find them is an important part of this. Networking's got about the same reputation as the word sales, but it's absolutely important. And of course, social media has made that easier than before. Beyond that, it was a matter of setting goals, reaching goals, keeping promises I made to myself. One of the things that I talk to people about at conferences where I speak is when you set a goal for your writing, whatever that goal is, you've made a promise to yourself. Now, the thing is that think about the people you love. You would stop at nothing to keep a promise you made to them.
Right.
Why don't you treat yourself with that same level of love and respect and make damn sure you keep the promises you've made yourself for yourself?
Absolutely. And what tends to be the poison pill that people take to not keep that promise with their work or what they want to do with their work and see what happens to it?
Well, lousy me. There's so many, but they kind of fall into the same category. People say, I don't have time to write, or I don't have time to promote my writing.
Mhm.
Whenever you say, I don't have time to blank, what you really are saying is, I am prioritizing other things above blank. So when you say, I don't have time to write, you're saying, I am prioritizing other things above my writing. Now, sometimes people just have a life where that's completely legit. They're having a full-time job that fulfills them, relationships with their wives and their children and their friends, and a hobby that really brings them joy. That's fine. And if that's your life and you want to keep writing as another hobby that brings you joy, that's just, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Mhm.
But sometimes you look at what people are doing instead of writing. It's binging that next episode on Netflix. It's arguing with strangers on the internet. It's doing stuff that you promised somebody you'd do, even though you didn't really want to do it and you just didn't know how to say no.
Yeah.
Those are the things that you can eliminate so that you can make and protect the time that you have for writing. And a lot of the coaching I do on writing is navigating ways to do that.
So time management, how are you allocating your time? I bet a lot of people, writers included, don't have any kind of sense of how they allocate their time. They just sort of let something happen and something else happens, and pretty soon the day's over and it's time for dinner.
Yeah, and that's just another of those things where every writer I've ever met can understand time management. It's just that they never took a business class and were never called upon to learn how to do this. And it's a very simple concept that all writers can understand. They just haven't been exposed to the concept yet.
Yeah. So how do they surmount that? Where do you start fixing that problem?
There's a number of good professional resources on there. One of them is Pomodoro, Pomodoro, which is a process by which you just time yourself so that if you promise yourself you'd write for 30 minutes, you write for 30 minutes. You don't write for 10 minutes, then fart about on social media for 20. Uh, Time management and discipline, which is a word I don't even like very much, even though I am a martial artist, because discipline, most people I know who are really into something and are congratulated for having the discipline to get good, they're doing something they love already. It's like having the discipline to get really good at sex. You know, the practice is fun, but it's really more of a habit. And being in the habit of writing for 30 minutes instead of 10 minutes, being in the habit of turning on your word processor instead of Facebook when you sit down, having the habit of telling your friends and family, no, from this time to this time, I'm writing, and I shouldn't be disturbed any more than if I was in a class at a local community college. Those are habits that you build by just doing them over and over and over again.
Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People.
Damn Skippy, sir. Absolutely.
Um, I know the answer to that. So I'm going to say, what about taking an MBA program? Will that teach you the discipline you need, in your opinion?
MBAs and MFAs, I have a thing I say that
Sorry, I meant FA.
yeah,
Yeah.
both of them really. Actually, these days, uh, there's a thing I say, and even though I respect and love many people who are excellent writers who got MFAs, and I say F your MFA. There's a small portion of the population whose goals are congruent with getting an MFA. That is, I estimate 10 to 15% tops of the people who want to and can make a living as writers. In fact, if what you want to do is make a living as a writer, an MFA is probably a dead end and a distraction. Most of those tend to steer you towards writing as a literary writer, which is usually not the kind of money that you can, eat food and sleep indoors on. But again, I want to be very clear that there are people that an MFA is exactly the right thing for, and for those people, they should go get an MFA. For the rest of us, there are much cheaper, much less time-consuming methods that will get you where you want to be at a much faster rate.
For example?
For example, well, I've got my program that I'll talk about in a little bit, but besides that, jumping in on Jay Boyer has a great program about selling books on Kindle. The Kindlepreneur program is pretty good as well. There's all kinds of educational resources out there. Joanna Penn's blog is a good place to start as well. Just a lot of places where you can get the information you need to know how to go from zero to making a living writing in as little as possible. It took me 6 months by applying the lessons I learned from my martial arts teachers and from you and from some other mentors of mine, Walter John Williams, etc., and applying those things to making a living writing. And I was able to do that in half a year.
Well, that's pretty impressive. I think it took me a little longer, but I didn't have a mentor, but we're talking about mentors, Joanna and the other person you mentioned. These are informal mentorship programs, you might say, right?
Yeah, a lot of the online resources now, you pay a fee, $99, $200, $300, up to $400, $500, where you just get access to a whole lot of information. Throw it out there for you to read and to view and to watch. And there's some support. There's often a forum, but it's got the same problem that a lot of writers' conferences do, where they give you a bunch of information. You drink from a fire hose, but nobody really takes responsibility to help you build the habits it takes to apply what you learn.
Right.
That's why one of the talks I give at every conference that will let me is on the very last session of the very last day, and it's called "Okay, So Now What?", where we spend an hour making a plan to leverage the things that they learned over the course of the weekend.
Yeah. So let's jump into. I'm eager to hear more about your program for writers that you've hatched.
All right. So Write Like Hell is, you know how they say that good artists borrow and great artists steal.
Yes.
I stole the basic framework from one of my martial arts mentors, a guy named Tom Callis. And what he created was a program for people who were serious about martial arts training, but had reached a level that there was nobody local that could continue to teach them. And this was a year-long program of just incredible demands. For example, 50,000 push-ups in a year, run 1,000 miles in a year, go apologize to 3 people you did wrong. Very demanding program. And at the end of that program, more than anything else, I came out of that with a different understanding, a different paradigm of how much I was capable of doing in a day. And the Write Like Hell program is inspired by that, though it's not as intense. And what it is, it consists of 4 basic branches. The first one is that I sit down with folks, each individual, and we figure out an aggressive but attainable goal for their writing, for their publicity around their writing, a goal related to their wellness or their relationships, and then a 4th goal that they choose. And we make them aggressive, but something they can get done. The second thing I do is that I teach them everything I know through a series of personal coaching and videos and other communications, and I put them in touch with other people who know more than me so that whoever it is in the program has all the information they need, all the knowledge they require to achieve those goals. The third part is the part that I think is more unusual in the writing circus, because the first 2 you can find in a lot of places. The third one is where I relentlessly encourage, inspire, harass, harry, chivvy, annoy, vex, and occasionally threaten you on a weekly basis to make sure that you are on track to get those goals done.
Yay, super mentor.
I mean, Again, borrowing from Tom Callis, when he would call me on the phone and ask if I'd done my push-ups for the day, if I said no, coach, and started making excuses, he would put me on speaker and said, "I'll wait," and I'd have to knock him out right then. And that's the level of commitment you need to give yourself, the habit you need to build if you're going to really make it in the writing game. And my job as a mentor and a coach is to encourage you to do it enough times it becomes a habit.
Okay.
And then the fourth branch of Write Like Hell is we do one cohort a year, and it starts in November this year. And you are a member of the group with these other people, and you help encourage each other, support each other, commiserate, call me a bastard behind my back, whatever it takes, and also to help each other by reviewing each other's books and promoting each other's newsletters and all that stuff. And you put it all together, and I find that it creates a roadmap that can honestly be life changing. Those are the words that an alumni from last year's program used this weekend when we were talking.
Well, it certainly sounds like if you followed Tom's program, you would achieve that in not too long a time period. I'm thinking the 1,000 push-ups is strength. The running 1,000 miles is endurance, and the third, making these apologies, is a form of learning humility. Would you say?
Yeah.
Okay. And so in applying those to becoming a writer, yeah, you need to be strong. You need to be determined every single day to make your commitment to the time that you said that you were going to write, whether it's 1 hour or 3 hours. I remember hearing about, I don't remember the authors anymore, but there were authors. I would write 1,000 words every day. I would write 100 words every day. I would write from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and then I would have lunch and go out for a walk for the afternoon. Everybody's got something different. Nobody's exactly like anybody else in their own personal discipline, but they got to have something that creates that strength to keep going. And sometimes I've heard about people who believe that there's a white page looking at them instead of a page filled with type. I don't know what the problem is. There's something they must be doing wrong to have just this white page staring back at them from the screen. But anyway, be that, I'm making a joke here. Okay.
Yeah, I love what Robert Parker, one of your city fellow Bostonians, said about writer's block. He had his routine. He was talking about in an interview 5 pages a day. And I'm done when I get my 5 pages. When asked about writer's block, he said, "I'm a professional writer. Has your plumber ever called you and said he can't come in today because he had plumber's block?"
Right.
No, he did not. Another of my favorite authors, Jim Butcher, says, "I don't have a muse. I have a mortgage."
Right. Right.
And that's, I think, one of the keys to my ability to go full time in 6 months was I had kids in a house and no other source of income. It was write or die. Well, maybe not die, but certainly let down the people I love, which is worse for most of us.
Yeah. Right, or food stamps.
Yeah.
So, okay, so then we have the endurance that you have to be committed to getting over that white page phenomenon, to write every day and to get to the end of your novel, because I'm sure there are a lot of people that never finish their novel, and it's probably not a bad novel, but they've just never finished it. And the third,
also giving yourself permission to write a bad novel first. You
yeah,
have to write a bad novel before you can write a good novel. And if you're really, really lucky, it's the same novel.
and that's your humility. That's the humility of saying, I haven't written the great American novel. I've written kind of a piece of crap, but I'm going to write another one. I'm going to rewrite this one and make it good. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So if someone was interested in your program, how would they get started? Is everybody, do they start in classes or do they start individually and move along through the program? How many people?
Do cohorts, and we do cohorts. So I like to start everybody in a group so they're kind of at the same pace and they get to know each other, and there's a team spirit to it, which I really appreciate. The next one starts in November, and we're taking applications now for it.
Okay.
Folks can find me on Iron Writer or email me via Fictional Cafe, and I think we'll post a blog post about it as well pretty soon about that, and we will be discounting it for Fictional Cafe members.
Okay. Okay. So they can go. We'll provide the information at the end of this interview with you for a link to go and read this from your own site. And then they can get in touch with you there. I noticed you have a sign up sheet which probably is the first step in getting into your newsletter and into your whole modus operandi and how the thing works.
Just
Uh,
so.
and so it runs for 1 year, right? Okay. And does each person set their own goals for what they hope to achieve in that year?
Pretty much. I mean, we work together on it with a lot of folks. They set a goal, and then we take a look at that goal, and I'll nudge them a little bit about. So that's based on what you have been writing. You're going to be writing a lot more for the next year. So why don't we bump that up to this? Let's push ourselves a little bit. Although usually the goal that most of the writers have trouble with is the one about marketing and publicity. A lot
Sure.
of them don't even know what kind of goal to set. And luckily, I know a little bit about that, and I know some people who know a lot more than me about that, and we can help with that and get the education in so they know how to create a good marketing plan for their book and how to execute that on a daily basis.
Yeah, because the book isn't finished once you've finished writing it. It's just really beginning
Yeah,
if you want people to read it. Yeah,
and you should be marketing your book before it's even finished.
yeah, yeah. And I feel so bad for people who don't get that part of it without, rubbing anybody's nose in it. There's one particular writer whom I know who wrote a wonderful science fiction book in 2012. And to date, he has exactly 2 reviews on his Amazon page and keeps wondering why aren't people flocking because I have a beautiful cover and it's a great book. But it's
Yeah, and I don't even feel bad for folks like that because, I mean, if that's what you want, there's nothing wrong with wanting that.
yeah, right.
And I'll tell you straight up that if you're happy with where your writing is and the progress of your writing career, Write Like Hell is not for you. It's not easy and it's not cheap. But for folks who want to go from those 2 reviews of the book that sells a couple copies every few months to a legitimate income stream that they can eventually turn into their sole source of income, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for people who are ready to make that commitment and to take the next big step.
Well, that sounds like the way to go. And I always think of things like this. You said it's not inexpensive. I don't know how much it is, but I'm sure that that the pricing is reasonable and probably incremental. People can pay on a monthly basis to be in your program. And what they have to think about, what I always think about, is ROI, return on investment. What are you getting back for all this specialized guidance and help through the process of writing that you could not have gotten any other way, or perhaps not gotten any other way, but it would be more expensive. And the funny thing about this article that I mentioned earlier was some of these classes that are offered by these quote unquote big name authors, and I don't really think that being an author makes you a good teacher of writing. I see them as 2 separate skill sets. But there was one that was a 2-day weekend retreat, and it was $3,500.
Yeah, it's a little ridiculous. Clarion's way up there. One of my mentors, who I respect a lot, has his Taos Toolbox every year, and it's many thousands of dollars for like 4 days. And I'm not saying that there's not enough value there. I mean, he had George R. R. Martin came to speak at that one year to spend a week with these people, which is great. But you look at the cost that some of these people are charging, and it astounds me. Now, mine's not cheap. It's $3,000 for the year. But you will, if you follow the program, earn that back. In some cases within the year, and certainly within the next couple of years.
I don't think that's an unreasonable figure. It would be for a 2-day weekend, yeah, but not for a year. Okay.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
investment. Are you willing to invest your time and your money in a career? You went to college for a career.
Yeah.
You know.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a drop in the bucket for an MFA. Yeah. Well, you know what I always think, Jason, is it's going to work if you work it.
Just so.
The way I approach things, and I pass that advice on to everybody who's watching this interview with you. But thanks for your time today and for sharing this. I think it's a very exciting program, and I want to get this word out to the rest of the Fictional Cafe baristas and subscribers, all 800 and plus of them. And I hope that some people get in touch with you and ask for more information.
Me too. Thanks so much for having me today, Jack.
Sure. November 1st is the next one.
Correct. And we usually solidify and finalize in the middle of October.
Okay. So
By
people
then,
need to
it's
go.
usually filled up. So
So
take a
people
look.
need to get their applications into you. Yeah.
Just so.
Okay. Cool. All right. Thanks, man. All right.
Thank you. Bye,
We'll
con Dios.
see you next time.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.